Okay, it's that time again for this edition of Into the Abyss. We talk about our recommendations for books in the horror genre. So, Tom, why don't you go ahead first with your recommended book for this edition?
Okay, now like our friend Joe Sullivan, I'm a big fan of the zombie genre, and I kind of think that many zombie genre fans are more into it for the action than the horror. But if I had to bring out a novel, I would have to say World War Z, a 2006 publication by Max Brooks. Now, fun fact for those who don't know, Max Brooks is the son of comedic legendary director Mel Brooks. If you don't know who Mel Brooks is, you need to get out of this country. You don't belong here. Okay? Now, moving on.
The hammer of truth has already come out. So.
No, it's come on, seriously, it's Mel Brooks. He's
Mel
a
Brooks
legend.
is awesome.
It's only a flesh wound.
Mel Brooks.
That's
right, why not?
Oh my gosh! Moving on.
Moving on.
Okay. Anyways, World War Z. It's a very interesting novel concerning It takes place after the zombie apocalypse. Essentially, that the world is starting to reform, and it's held in the series of interviews that a UN investigator is doing to try to understand what happened with the apocalypse. What brought it out? Why did it spread so quickly? Failures of governments to react, successes of governments reacting to it.
You're saying this while we're dealing with the whole coronavirus thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because that's why people like the zombie genre. It deals with humans' two biggest fears: the fear of being eaten, and the fear of viruses and illnesses. And it's a very easy read because they're actually shorter chapters. Each one is an interview, and you kind of tear through it. Maybe it's not as deep as some of the things Kevin is going to give us sooner or later, but everything from the origins of it, and I really liked it too. It was in China. Essentially in China, where a father and son did a deep dive to a village that was underwater due to the building of the Three Gorges Dam. And the father disappeared, the son came back up sick, he became patient zero. Then it was also very believable in terms of how it would spread. The black market organ trade, illegal immigration, or just, there's the border, someone's going to cross it. Interviews with all types of people who had some involvement in it. Interview with a man who made a placebo vaccine and made a fortune off of it. And while he was being interviewed, he was living in some compound in Siberia because he's wanted all over the world. An astronaut who was on the International Space Station who tried to keep the satellites going so communication could work. The failure of what was called the Battle of Yonkers, because when the virus hit New York City, now you have millions of zombies. The military's failure, and it really looked like everything was just falling apart until mankind finally got their act together. And a very believable situation. I bring that up because the movie was horrendous. I think they drove a dump truck full of money up to Max Brooks' house and just dumped it out on his front porch. Because, some things they brought up, one section was when in Israel, a nation which is on a war footing 24/7 because they're surrounded by enemies, they kept their ear to the ground always, and they took it seriously, and they built a giant wall around the city of Jerusalem and let non-infected Jews and Palestinians in, because for now they understand it's no longer a religious conflict, it's us versus the dead. Also, in South Africa, they mentioned a apartheid politician who came up with the idea of, while a majority of the good people are regrouping behind walled cities, they're going to leave smaller groups of people outside for the zombies to be distracted by. So, in terms of horror, of course, the biggest horror is always what mankind does. In terms of scares, I'd say 3 out of 5. In terms of a zombie novel, this is 5 out of 5. Even if it's a big book, you would definitely enjoy reading it, and I can't recommend it enough. It's so well written. Max Brooks did write it also as a response to American isolationism, not wanting to help out the rest of the world, as well as nations that even with this new terrible virus, we're still just sniping at each other. Interesting. Wow, I can't wait for the next illness to come out. So, Max Brooks, World War Z, a very good book. I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're a fan of the zombie genre.
Great, CW.
Well, I will add on to that. If anything that the coronavirus has taught us it's that every zombie apocalypse book should start with a toilet paper shortage, because we're dealing with that now. My recommendation actually this month is The Troop by Nick Cutter. This was not my usual type of book, I will say this. I've mentioned before in previous videos, I'm not a big gore hound. I'm into horror more for the scares than I am for the gore. I'm fine with gore being part of the story, but when it goes on for page after page, to be honest, if nothing else, I'm losing my interest, if not losing my lunch. So the Troop falls in that category, but it's very well written. Nick Cutter, which is the pen name, I'm trying to remember his actual name. He also wrote
It's a pen name?
It's a pen name.
I never knew that.
It's Craig Davidson.
No! Really?
I think so.
Holy
If
crap.
I'm remembering things correctly, yes.
Wow!
So anyway,
I didn't know that.
yeah, the Troop. The book is excellent. The writing is excellent. We'll say this. The concept is, the scouts go out onto their weekend retreat. They're camping on an island, and then a person infected with some sort of nasty illness, they're not clear early on what it is, escapes onto the island. He's escaped from some sort of facility, and then he goes to the island where you have these 5 troops and their scoutmaster who are trying to earn badges and all that. Great setup. You start to learn the characters, and you realize early on, once you start to see what's wrong with the guy, your patient zero, and you start to see the personalities of the various troops, after a few chapters, you're like, oh, you can see that this is dynamite. The setup for it is phenomenal. I don't know that I've ever read a horror book that set it up so well, where you can see the ingredients that are there, everything that the author's going to work with. You're like, this is going to be terrifying. Like that for me, the biggest dread was the first third, where you can see everything in place, and you can tell that it's going to go wrong, and you can see how it's going to go wrong, and that for me was actually the best part.
Right.
I hope they didn't put, like, Boy Scouts Guide to the Apocalypse. Do you think it's based on this book?
Well, I think it had much more of a Lord of the Flies type feel to it. You can kind of see it go in that direction. I will say this. It's very much about the body horror, and it is the kind of book where it goes on for page after page. This is not for the squeamish. Kevin, you said before, there's certain movies and books that you appreciate that it's well done, but you don't necessarily know if you're having fun. It did reach that part for me. There are some sections of it where it's going on for, I did the audiobooks, I don't know how many pages, but it is page after page of just the gore that's there. It loses me at that point. That said, I recognize that that's me. If you love body horror, if you're into that more extreme horror, you will probably love this. When it got off of that and got back onto the story with the characters, I loved it. Nick Cutter is a fantastic writer. It's so well done. My skin was crawling listening to the descriptions. He got everything he could out of it. And one thing I also realized early on is what it is, what's going on with the illness.
Right.
A little bit of a spoiler, I guess. It's dealing with worms, and it's the parasitic worm from hell. And that is something that for me I've recognized for a long time. I've thought about writing something with parasitic worms, and I've realized that that's one of those things that if I write it, it's going to be really hard for me to write it, because that is something that does bother me. It gets close to a phobia for me. So it goes there, and it turns it up not to an 11, but it goes up to about a 35. It goes there. If you like extreme horror, if you like body horror, it's, oh man, it goes there. Wow. It goes there. I'm looking forward to reading something a little bit lighter next time. No, but it is so well done. The suspense is there. The tension is there. That's what I absolutely love. I like how well the characters are written. It's a fantastic book if you're the audience for it.
Awesome.